Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and the Uncommon Good provided by Mercy College of Health Sciences. Learn more at mchs.edu.
Welcome, folks, to the Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. Every week, diving deep into the truth of Catholic social teaching and restoring all things in Christ.
The Uncommon Good is on the air. I'm Bo Bonner.
Now I'm Dr. Bud Marr.
We're coming to you live from these United States of America, here smack dab in the middle in Des Moines, Iowa, where it is very fall-like outside, Bud. Would you not agree?
Oh, I'm happy. When I woke up and stepped outside this morning, very happy.
Falling into fall here in Des Moines, Iowa.
And there's playoff baseball on tonight.
Yeah.
Who are the Cubs playing?
No, we got to be nice because Deacon Tony said he's actually cheering for the Cardinals but for family reasons, not because of us.
Sabbatical for any Cub mockery.
That's right. We appreciate it either way. But yeah, so playoff baseball, football. You can drink coffee like in the middle of the afternoon outside, and you don't like ruin your shirt sweating. It's that wonderful time of the year. And like I said, we're both here, Bo Bonner, Dr. Bud Marr. We both work at Mercy College of Health Sciences, but I'm going to let you go first. What do you do there? Then I'll explain.
Yeah, classes are in full swing, so we're staying busy at the college. I'm the associate provost, so looking over academic affairs.
Absolutely. Senior advisor here for mission initiatives, but also the director of the Center for Human Flourishing. And I have exciting news to tell everybody out there. We actually have a website and something for people to do coming up. So mchs.edu/flourish, Flourish, flourish. mchs.edu/flourish. This is the website for the Center for Human Flourishing. Still very small, because we're just getting started, but the important part is if you scroll down, you'll see that we have an event that no matter where you are, even if you're one of our listeners overseas, you can join us. So Dr. Russell Hittinger, a longtime mentor and friend of mine, but also just famous as he should be because of the great work he does. He's on 2 Vatican councils. Brilliant mind. He's going to be the inaugural honorary fellow for the Center for Human Flourishing. But I can't tell you how much an honor that is to make this work out. His talk is Intermediate Associations as a Key to Human Flourishing. I've been telling people this is going to be the cornerstone for the whole theory behind the center. So Thursday, October 21st at 6:30, you can all join us on Zoom to watch him. So October 21st, 6:30, if you go to mchs.edu/flourish, you can join the Zoom webinar and watch wherever you're at.
Well, I've benefited a lot from Dr. Hittinger's writings myself, especially what he's written on the natural law. But I know, like you said, he's a mentor and friend of yours. And looking at the website, mchs.edu/flourish, have you ever told him he looks very young?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of got like that Professor Xavier thing going on.
What's not very fair about this that I should bring up is... So both of my mentors, Dr. Hittinger and then Dr. Stanley Hauerwas, who we both know, people see them now and go like, they're so skinny and young and looking. Well, they both had fat phases and in their midlife, like, really got into, like, taking care of themselves. And now both of them look like far younger than they do. So my only hope, Bud, is I, too, have had a fat phase for decades. And maybe I will look as svelte and wonderful as Dr. Hittinger at some point.
Maybe you can follow that same trajectory.
Like, lose all my hair, though.
Yeah.
For the Dr.
I think shaving your head helps, like Michael Jordan,
Yeah.
Because you don't want that receding hairline showing, so once it starts to go, just embrace that.
That's right. Get the sort of like the Italian glasses and just roll with it. That's right. So, of course, we've been talking about the Center for Human Flourishing, but that's because it's Mercy College of Health Sciences who underwrites our show. So, mchs.edu, of course, check out the center, but check out everything else that's going on. Like you said, full swing in fall, but getting geared up for spring and summer already. We have all sorts of starts, have all sorts of programs. You can be on campus, you can be all online, and everything in between, accelerated programs. mchs.edu. Thank you, Mercy College, for underwriting our show. Well, Bud, we talked a bit about events on the opening segment, but what we're going to talk about today, October 4th was the Feast of St. Francis of Assisi, and what we want to point out to people is St. Francis is not just a hippie. He might be a little bit of a hippie, but that's not fully what he is.
Yeah, St. Francis famously imitated Christ, like a really profound degree. And just like Jesus, I think there's ways that we look back to his life and we maybe sentimentalize or, don't see the more challenging aspects of what St. Francis brings to the table. So talking about all things St. Francis today, I'm excited. After Leviathan, it's kind of nice to get to something sort of like constructive and positive that you can really embrace.
Absolutely. So we'll be back with the most famous saint of the Middle Ages, and rightly so, the seraphic man himself, St. Francis, and what that has to do with the common good. This is the Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. Stick around, and we'll be back right after this.
Ever wonder what Vatican II was really all about? Don't miss world-renowned theologian Douglas Bushman's presentation, Is Vatican II Really the Gift, the Grace, and the Word of the Holy Spirit for the Church of Our Time? Thursday, October 7th at 6 p.m. at Sacred Heart Parish in West Des Moines. Professor Bushman will unpack the true meaning of the Second Vatican Council and provide hope for a church in crisis. That's Thursday, October 7th at 6 p.m., Sacred Heart Parish. Details at iowacatholicradio.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by Northwest Bank. Commitment you can bank on. Northwest Bank is a community bank serving Iowa and Nebraska. NW.BANK. Thank you, Northwest Bank, for supporting Iowa Catholic Radio. Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Christ is the Answer with Father John Ricardo is provided by Confluence Brewing Company, brewed locally and featuring regular, seasonal, and limited release beers available at local stores, bars, and restaurants. Confluence Brewing Company at 1235 Thomas Beck Road, off the bike trail south of Grays Lake, and online at confluencebrewing.com. Confluence Brewing Company offers curbside service and would like to thank you for your support. Thank you, Confluence Brewing Company, for your support of Iowa Catholic Radio.
Back with the Uncommon Good, Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr joining you this Wednesday. Thank you for listening to the show. We want to make sure you know that there's plenty of ways that you can plug in to Iowa Catholic Radio. Just go to iowacatholicradio.com. You can listen live, donate, find out more about what people look like. There's, pictures if you really are worried about it. We were talking about whether we're all bald or not. You can see that we're not quite there yet. Some of us. No comment. You can also go to facebook.com and look at Iowa Catholic Radio and befriend us there and follow us. You can go to Twitter at IA Catholic Radio and follow our tweets. And then if you download the Iowa Catholic Radio app, you can listen live, donate, anywhere that you have data through your phone. So today, Bud, we wanted to talk about St. Francis of Assisi, whose feast was October 4th. I realize that we're starting a sort of new theme. Maybe this is our new series, is actually talking about saints' feasts and how they all relate to the common good. We talked about St. Jerome last time. We're talking about a very different sort of character now. St. Jerome, known for being grumpy, but St. Francis of Assisi, known for, whether correct or not, being the very kind, nature-loving hippie that I think most people run into in their gardens. And I think that what caught your eye, because you threw out the idea today for the show, and I think it's a good one, is there's a way in which hagiography always smooths over saints. Weirdly enough, even with Jerome, when we make him like Mino mad guy, like that's to flatten him and not get into the complications of like how his life challenges ours. And I think St. Francis is the same way. If he's just a guy who likes nature, then every time you throw a few breadcrumbs at a bird, you're like St. Francis. And I actually think his entire life is a much greater challenge and witness to how things should be different in the social order than we give him credit for.
Bo, when folks talk about St. Francis preaching to the animals, do you know what was he preaching?
Probably about hell. He's like, listen, birds. No, kidding. I don't know.
Okay, I was curious because, you're right. When even walking through Windsor Heights near where we live, you do see a lot of St. Francis statues in people's gardens. And I would just want to go on record. I don't have any problem with that. Like sometimes I worry on the show, I just come off as like a grumpy old man.
Yeah.
But like the St. Francis statues are cool. And it kind of warms my heart to be walking through Des Moines, Iowa and see so many of them. But I guess I worry about, there is a way where St. Francis can sort of like match up with our times.
Right.
It goes without saying, but Americans love their pets, and there's a way where, just the way he's presented, even with the statues and things, he seems completely non-threatening. And I guess once I get into the actual specifics of his life, I think he really challenges a lot of sort of maybe the spiritual faults that we're prone to fall into. I mean, a huge one, obviously, is like his emphasis on simplicity and apostolic poverty. But I also think, we meet a lot of folks today, especially young people, who for maybe legitimate or like sincere intentions, they say, like, I'm spiritual but not religious, or like I'm religious but I just don't do institutional religion. And, a fascinating piece of St. Francis' life is that all of the things that we laud, his simplicity, his care and love for creation, and on, they were never divorced from ecclesial realities. So, I mean, a centerpiece of his life after his conversion is ecclesial reform, which, again, is a theme that I think we all can sort of rally around today.
No, and even what I like about St. Francis and why I think he is, in the hagiography, the moments that are probably the most true are ones where the saints come off as real doofuses, and it's like really important part of their life. So I love that he goes in and he's praying and he hears Jesus go, fix my church. And so he's like, okay. And he literally like repairs a church. And Jesus like with his head on his forehead's like, no, the whole church, buddy, deeply sighing. And then Francis like, oh, okay. I get it. But the reason I think that that's sort of illustrative in a lot of his life is about how much more he has, like you said, to symbolize to us and challenge us. Is if you look at like church reform and what he meant, it's easy for us to go, go rebuild my church. And you're like, yeah, well, I'll put up the money to rebuild the church. And no, there's actually something much harder to do. And rebuilding that church meant giving away his life that he was used to. I mean, people forget St. Francis was a wealthy kid's child. Yeah. And to do what he did, of course, maybe not all of us are called to radically beg for our supper every night in order to found a new religious order. But certainly he is the sort of rich man in the parable who said yes instead of no to Jesus. And that's a challenge to all of us, because if Jesus tells us, like it appears to us, like rebuild the church, we're really hoping he means like throw in some cash to like make this building look better. But what he really has is almost something far more deep and challenging.
Well, and I think you see an analogy to how we remember St. Francis and how we remember St. Mother Theresa, where, again, I think even secular folks, well-intentioned, they can look at those figures and really sort of like say, oh, like this person, this is a religious figure that we can sort of get behind. They loved peace, they loved the poor, and on and on. And it kind of, it's outside of... who's the famous atheist?
Christopher
Hitchens.
Yeah.
Hitchens. Yes. Who's not going to like Mother Teresa? But what you see with both of those figures is that the work that they did, it could not be divorced from their love of the Eucharist. So again, a great lover of the liturgy, very connected to the church, wanting to see the reform of the church. And then I think a big piece of this bow, when we remember St. Francis, tying it to a theme in the show, is we remember him as a man of peace. But again, like we've talked a lot about on the show, like it's understanding those terms in the full like theological sense of the word. So with Francis, I don't think peace for him was simply the absence of violence. Peace was the tranquility of order, and we can only know the peace that God brings when our personal life is properly ordered, but I think also society. And so, there's all sorts of ways where he challenged the powerful and the comfortable. Even like he traveled to try to convert like a sultan, so he was seeking the conversion of those who were outside the church. And
figured he would die too, so it's not like he went and looking for a retiring peaceful life. Like threw himself in the middle of a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so in all those ways, it's a lot like Jesus. Jesus said, "Turn the other cheek." He said, "If someone takes your jacket, give them the shirt off your back," and on and on. But also when he saw the downtrodden being mistreated, he certainly, prophetically spoke against those, like that sort of activity.
I even think one of the more telling episodes that you'll hear people say, it's a way in which St. Francis made how would you put it? He retracted something he said early in his life, or what he did, but even it shows that it's not quite how people understand. So I think later in his life, people are asking him if he had a regret. And he said, "I regret how I treated brother donkey." And you're like, oh, was that some dude? Well, no, it was his own body, because in his life, especially early on, not only did he like take the roughest clothes and barely eat what he needed. But he flagellated himself, which was sort of typical at the time, but was known for roundly beating himself to mortify his flesh. And so at the end of his life, he goes, brother ass is a creature of God too, and I should have treated him with more respect. Now, sometimes you get people, and I mean, I've done this too, right? It's like that goes like, oh, well, if St. Francis of Assisi, even he says we got to give ourselves a break. It's always funny to say that as like very comfortable 2021 Christians in air conditioning. But that serves up 2 points. The man of peace, how was he peaceful? Well, he was peaceful by mortifying his flesh. And even though in the end he goes, whipping myself till I bled was probably not what I should have done, it still shows that he thinks you should mortify your flesh. Mm-hmm. So peace is won at a much more difficult pursuit than I think we... And so that's why I went him just to be like a garden guy who likes birds and dogs.
It's fascinating to look back at some of these great figures who founded religious orders. I know you have a strong devotion to St. Benedict. And for myself, when I think about those figures in the abstract, I always assume they just took the most radical path possible. But really, they were always asking like these prudential questions about what was fitting, what was in a sense like going too far. You mentioned St. Francis like reevaluating his old experience, but like with the role of St. Benedict too. I mean, I think it's important when we're struggling with scrupulosity or guilt or whatever to even think back to Benedictine communities, the Franciscan order, and see how like so many different types of individuals came into those communities, and they were constantly wrestling with what was the golden mean to become more like Christ.
No, it's interesting too, because like on one hand, you have the Flowers of St. Francis is a wonderful book that everybody should read. So you have something like culminating in him seeing the seraphic Christ, and then he has the stigmata, right? Like that is, people can't expect that. That's just an amazing, miraculous event. But on the other hand, like something very elemental, for instance, so when his father was like, you're going to come with me, you're not going to become a mendicant. And he, Francis like, no, I need to do this, Dad. And he goes like, those very clothes on your back belong to me. And so then St. Francis very famously strips naked, gives his father back his clothes, and then walks to the bishop who, surrounds him in his mantle. And you start to see, right, that you want that to be miraculous too, but you're like, no, that's the thing about St. Francis is that's very much like if your eye sinneth, then pluck it out. Now, again, scrupulosity can make us go like too far on this, but that starts to be the radical nature of St. Francis is we want to make radical what really is actually center, and then we want to make central what is actually like miraculous, and it's our way of, we saying, flattening out through hagiography. But we have to go to the next break. More about St. Francis and the common good when we get back. This is The Uncommon Good. We'll be back right after this.
At noon, Monday through Friday, the doctor is in. Dr. Ray Guarendi helps you with personal problems and professional questions. You'll love his fun approach and practical advice. The doctor is in on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network, connecting listeners with Christ.
I have a word for singles who are getting a bit older and are dating. I've met many of you who are waiting for that experience of being swept off your feet and finding the one. Stop putting that kind of emotional pressure on yourself. One of the reasons young lovers are swept off their feet is because they're still young. They're figuring out who they are, where they fit in the world, and what to do with their lives. They just left mom and dad a few years ago. They get swept off their feet easily because they're not all that stable. As you get older and more established, you know yourself. You meet potential spouses, and love unfolds in a different sort of way. A more peaceful way, one that puts solid friendship first. And like it is with a seasoned married couple, the fire of love isn't always as impassioned as you grow older, but it's deeper and in many ways far more beautiful. This is Chris Stefanik from reallifecatholic.com.
Ever wonder what Vatican II was really all about? Don't miss world-renowned theologian Douglas Bushman's presentation, Is Vatican II Really the Gift, the Grace, and the Word of the Holy Spirit for the Church of Our Time? Thursday, October 7th at 6 p.m. at Sacred Heart Parish in West Des Moines. Professor Bushman will unpack the true meaning of the Second Vatican Council and provide hope for a church in crisis. That's Thursday, October 7th at 6 p.m., Sacred Heart Parish. Details at iowacatholicradio.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Hal's Pumpkin Patch and Coming, open daily from 10 to 6 through October 31st. Featuring wagon rides, a corn maze, kitty corral, and more. Hal's Greenhouse of PumpkinPatch.com. Iowa Catholic Radio thanks Hal's Pumpkin Patch for their support.
Back with the Uncommon Good, Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr joining you this Wednesday. Thank you for listening to the show. We've been talking about how St. Francis of Assisi, not just a hippie. That's how you should. Yeah. That's how you should read the title.
What was your sign that you had in your house in Stillwater? Like hippies use the side door.
Yeah, hippies use the
there
back.
Was no side door.
Yeah, then there was no side door. Yeah, that was. It was a joke towards my uncle, who was a bona fide Austin, Texas hippie, which very different than the California ones, but. At any rate, use the side door. Yeah, it was pretty fun. So not just a hippie. We're not acting like St. Francis doesn't have some of the characteristics that make people kind of view him in that image, but there is, of course, much more to him, and the much more to him, I think, is even more challenging than what people normally think of. So, Bud, to close out the show, what's maybe the most elemental way that St. Francis challenges the sort of flat read of him as just a hippie?
Well, I think as the show's closing out, whenever we have these kind of discussions, we try to think about, well, what does this mean for our lives? How can this bring about conversion? And an obvious way is St. Francis imitated Christ in a profound manner. Paul says in Scripture, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And sometimes when we think about following Jesus, it can be intimidating because he's the Son of God, the Messiah who came for this like special purpose and mission. So when we look at someone like St. Francis, we see the love and the mercy of Christ like embodied at a specific point in history. But that conversion, I think, Bo, going with the theme of the show, is not simply individualistic. St. Francis, as we mentioned, was deeply concerned about the reform of the church. And I know, even in our conversations with good friends, a lot of Catholics today are concerned about what they see in the world, whether that's like at a national level. I think in the church, some more difficult news in the church this week. And so, rightly so, you see a lot of like passion and zeal for reform. I think St. Francis, we could call him like the icon or the doctor of reform, because he was deeply concerned, but his answer wasn't like, well, I'm going to take my father's money and like totally transform things, or I'm going to seek to be a bishop, or I'm going to go start like my own thing. It was within the church, and it was a love for the church as his mother. I know you've, we both love this great quote from the author, George Bernano, and I think this really captures it in a really wonderful way.
Yeah, so Bernano was he wrote Diary of a Country Priest, but he's also written tons of essays. He's one of my favorite essayists. But he has this quote, which unfortunately it's hard to find in English, so you hear it here, folks. I got it confirmed by a French literature scholar. This is a good English translation. But he's Bernano's talking about reform of the church and comparing Francis to Martin Luther. And I just really think this encapsulates what we're getting at. So, Bernano, quote, "One can only reform the church by suffering for her. One can only reform the visible church by suffering for the invisible church. One cannot reform the church's vices except by pouring out the example of the most heroic virtue. It's possible that St. Francis of Assisi was no less disgusted than Martin Luther by the debauchery and simony of prelates. It is even certain that they made him suffer more cruelly than Luther, because he was a very different man than the German monk. But he did not defy iniquity or try to confront it. He threw himself into poverty, plunged himself into it as much as he could, as if it were the fountain of healing and purity. Instead of trying to rip from the hands of the church her ill-gotten goods, he filled her with invisible treasures, and under the guidance of this beggar, the heaps of gold and riches began to flower like a hedgerow in April. Can I say, in the hope of being understood better by some readers, that the church does not need critics but poets? When there is a crisis in poetry, what is important is not to denounce the bad poets, or even to hang them, but to write beautiful verse, to reopen the sacred fountains of inspiration." And I think that gets to what St. Francis does at his depth. And there's a way in which you go, well, that just sounds like flattening hagiography, and you go, no, look, the difference between, of course, poetry and like stuff you can buy on a sign from not a Home Depot. What are the ones that the Assemblies of God did?
I don't know.
What's that store?
Oh, Hobby Lobby.
Hobby Lobby, right,
Sorry,
thank you. Thank you. The difference between a Hobby Lobby plaque and poetry is the Hobby Lobby plaque covers as much as it reveals, and poetry is exactly the opposite. The poetic of Francis's life is to say that he shows such a radically different vision that it not only shows a way forward, but calls into question what is wrong with what is currently the case. And that's that image, right, of the money not being taken away, but that flowers growing on top of them. I just think is powerful. Bernano himself, a poet and a writer, captures what it means that Francis's radical willingness to throw himself into poverty, it didn't, like he said, wrestle from the church at the time what was wrong with it, but made it blossom where things were dead. And it seems to me that that's something endearing, not only for the church, but for our social order. If you are only trying to prune the trees, you'll forget that the point is to grow the flowers. And that's the work that we have to be about. So this is the Uncommon Good. May Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, reign in our hearts, our family, our city, our state, our nation, the world, solar system, the galaxy, the whole kit and caboodle. This is the Uncommon Good. But how can people join us in prayer here on Iowa Catholic Radio?
Yeah, please pray the Rosary daily with us at 9:30 a.m. It's also available anytime on the Iowa Catholic Radio app. You can pray the Angelus daily at 11:55 in the morning, and the Divine Mercy Chaplet daily at 2:55 p.m. Local shows and times are also available on demand at iowacatholicradio.com and on the app.
We just got done with Spring Carathon not too long ago, but we are still, of course, accepting donations. So if you didn't get a chance to donate, please think about doing so. You can do so online at iowacatholicradio.com. And then you can also call 515-223-1150 or text donate in order to be able to do that. We appreciate everybody who's given so far, but we still have so much going on in the diocese, in the diocese, but things that we're growing through the radio station that we would hope that you prayerfully consider to give. October is Pro-Life Month, and Iowa Catholic Radio is hosting a diaper drive for Intervisions Healthcare at our new offices, 1355 50th Street, Suite 500. A lot of fives in there, bud. West Des Moines. Diapers of all sizes needed, and you can drop off the new package of diapers during business hours, 8 to 4, Monday through Friday. Also, Iowa Catholic Radio has, on October 7th, at 6 p.m. at Sacred Heart Parish in West Des Moines, renowned theologian Douglas Bushman. All sorts of other things coming up. Look at iowacatholicradio.com for that. For Bud Marr, this is Bo Bonner. Thank you for joining the show. This is The Uncommon Good, and we'll be back next week.
The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr is heard every week on wonderful Catholic stations like this one, and anytime on podcast. Just search for The Uncommon Good.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and The Uncommon Good provided by Mercy College of Health Sciences. Learn more at mchs.edu.